when you did that, you lost your right to vote once the country reunited. And this was his form re-enfranchising him to vote. And I'll just read it to you. It says, State of Tennessee, County of Cannon, to all whom shall see these presents, greeting. Be it remembered that J.D. Francis, being a male inhabitant of the state of Tennessee of the age of 21 years, a citizen of the United States, and a resident of said county for 6 months, now last past, and having proved before me by 2 competent witnesses, who are known to have been at all times unconditional Union men, who are personally acquainted with the said J.D. Francis, that they verily believe that he has never been guilty of any of the disqualifications specified in the Act of February 25, 1867, is duly registered as a voter of said county and entitled to exercise the privilege of elective franchise, given under my hand 8th day of July, 1869 by R.S. Robinson, county registration for Cannon County. So
what they're saying is he didn't commit treason while he was a son.
I suppose that's what it means. I don't know.
So did they have to wait to?
I think there was a delay of some time. I think so.
After the
I think
war.
that's right. I think the local group is called the Sand Diggers.
Same diggers.
Same Diggers?
I have a copy of Hancock's diary,
Okay.
and there's a chapter in there about them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know why they were called that?
Ginseng. They called it ginseng.
Ginseng.
Yeah, they would dig. Yeah,
I'll say.
yeah, and that's what they called themselves.
Yeah. Well, now I'll tell you what else I had from him that Aunt Mabel gave me, but I donated that to MTSU. There was a bunch of long sheets of paper that had been sewn together so that they were longer, and they had notations that most people thought were some sort of musical notation. And the heading of it said, "This is to tramp by." So it had something, we assumed, to do with marching. Mm-hmm. And I gave it to the music department at MTSU. Wow. They have it there. But I can get you a picture of him to go with that if you like.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Well, I bet Bobby Fletcher was in that group.
Yeah, well, he's about right age. Yeah.
He's a Sand Digger.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
We have a lot of sign diggers.
Hey, he didn't know Bill Art.
I wouldn't be surprised. They put a metal roof on him. Well, I will share with you what little information we have about the history of the Church of Christ here in Auburntown. The records, with the exception of, I do have the ledger that was kept when this building was built in 22, and I have that at home, and probably will donate that to you sometime too. But I'll share some things about that in what I'm going to say. And this is not a theological discussion, Jimmy. This is just history. Although some theology may enter into it. You may be in for some surprises. Any history of the Church of Christ in Auburntown must begin with the summary of the movement that brought a Church of Christ here. In the late 18th and 19th centuries, 2 religious movements merged under the leadership of one name you've heard of, the other you probably haven't. One of them was named Alexander Campbell, and the other was named Barton Stone. You've heard of Campbell, you haven't probably heard of Stone. It's historically known, if you look it up on Google, as the Stone-Campbell movement. And most of us are acquainted with us being referred to as Campbellites, which I am not ashamed of, actually. We're the only church I know of that has a brand of cigarettes named Campbellite cigarettes. I was bowling in New Orleans one time with a group from the church, and the fella came over the PA system and said there'd be a lady walking through the lanes in a few minutes with free samples of Campbellite cigarettes. And I had a pack of those for quite some time. I finally ditched them. But we were also called Stonites, depending on which of those 2 leaders was more well known. As far as I know, and as far as I've read anywhere, that movement was the first non-denominational movement in America. The aim of Stone and Campbell was not to create another denomination, but to be just a church that belonged to Christ, and therefore not a denomination. It can be debated whether or not they succeeded in that, but at least that was their goal. Most of them, and this comes as a surprise to a lot of people, most of those earliest leaders in that movement were Presbyterian. And it was in part a protest against some of the extreme elements of Calvinism, which Presbyterianism was rife in at the time. Several distinguishing characteristics of this movement that are retained to this day in most churches of Christ around here are, number one, a cappella music. Now, it's sometimes said that we don't have music, and that's not true. We have very spirited, vibrant music. It just happens to be without instrumental accompaniment. I can remember, that's right.
I'll tell you something about that.
I can remember my granddaddy Hawkins telling me about this. He said, God created two instruments of music, the heart and the voice. And he said, that's good enough for me. and so that's one of our most well-known distinguishing characteristics.
Well, now, you remember Donald Logue? When he
I said this wasn't going to be theological. Go ahead, I'm kidding. Donald Logue, I remember very well.
You remember Donald Logue?
Yes.
Well, he bought us teenagers some tuning forks.
Yeah.
I call them forks.
So you could learn to lead singing.
Yeah. And I thought he was going to get fired over that.
Yeah. An instrument of music. Second is the weekly observance of the Lord's Supper. Anywhere you go in the South, at least, if you find a Church of Christ or a Christian church, on any given Sunday, you'll know that communion will be served on that Sunday. It's a staple of our heritage. And the third is adult or believer's baptism by immersion, which was different, of course, from the Presbyterians, and for the remission of sins. Interestingly, when Alexander Campbell, who had been a Scottish Presbyterian, concluded that his baptism should be by immersion, he didn't have anybody to go to immerse him among his own people. So he went to a Baptist preacher and got the Baptist preacher to immerse him. And that, as far as we know, was the first immersion among our people. Let's see. The churches that came from this movement are variously known as Churches of Christ, as here, Christian churches, or Disciples of Christ. And its members referred to themselves merely as Christians or disciples. We have been mistakenly accused of thinking, and this would be a fourth item, that we're the only ones going to heaven. That has never been a part of our theology. Ever, never, never. In fact, one of the things that our pioneers were fondest of saying is, we're not the only Christians, we're just Christians only. And they felt very firmly and strongly about that. And so if that dashes some people's concepts of us, I'm happy to dash that. This is interesting. You'll find this interesting. As late as the 1920s, and Uncle Lynn didn't remember for sure when it happened, but the sign over the door up here read Christian Church. This was the Auburn Christian Church. The Churches of Christ, that whole movement experienced a dramatic split around the turn of the century, around 1900, over instruments of music. And those churches that decided not to adopt an instrument largely took the name Church of Christ. And those that took the instrument used the name Christian Church. And it just took us a while here in Auburntown to get the news that things had changed. But I would love to have that old sign that read Christian Church in Auburn. Let's see. So it was not until around 1930 that the name was finally changed to reflect our practice. This movement was especially strong in Cannon County. I don't know if this is true now or not, but a few years ago, Cannon County, Tennessee, had the most Church of Christ members per capita of any county in America.
Wow.
And you could just drive through the hills and see so many churches of Christ. I doubt that that's the case now. But that was the
Nashville,
case.
Davidson County runs it a close second.
I wouldn't be surprised. Wouldn't be. It was inevitable that they called it a restoration movement because they wanted to restore the church of the first century, would come to this community. And this is written in Robert Mason's History of Cannon County. This is the earliest reference we have. S.E. Jones, preacher, wrote on September 14 of 1845 that he and his colleague J.J. Trott had 50 accessions, that is additions, at Woodbury, 23 at Brawley's Fork, and 1 at Poplar Stand, which of course now is Auburntown. And that was recorded in a journal called the Christian Review. So we know that the Church of Christ in Auburntown goes back at least to 1845. What we don't know is whether or not this 1 accession at Poplar Stand was added to an existing congregation in which the date goes further back, or if this person was the beginning of a congregation of Churches of Christ here. We just don't know. Daisy Dean Cooper was my mother's first cousin, and I got a lot of information from Daisy Dean years ago and jotted it all down. And she said that her 2 grandmothers were charter members. Those were the term that she used, charter members of this church. And they were Mary Bragg Carter, along with her husband J.W., the Carters, Carter Creek up here, and Mary Melton Hawkins, who was Papa Hawkins' mother, and ultimately her husband, Joe B. Hawkins. The Hawkins family had moved to this area from Mechanicsville over on the other side of Short Mountain, and family legend has it that they moved here to expand their moonshine business. And John Hawkins, they called him Big Pap, and this is Papa Hawkins' grandfather, built and lived in the house where Robbie and Charlie Harris lived for so many years. Who lives there now? Oh, okay. Well, anyway, that was the old Hawkins home place here in Auburntown. Let's see, I just shared that with you. By the way, the B in Joe B, you see B in a lot of Hawkins names is for burger. Big Ma'am Hawkins was a burger before she married. Anyway, one of his sons, Joe B, married a Melton girl from around Gazaway. And Church of Christ was quite strong in Gazaway. And those are the earliest names that we can identify with the Church of Christ here, the Carters and the Hawkinses. It's worth noting that, and this you'll find interesting, and most of you probably know it, that 2 of Mr. and Mrs. Hawkins' great-grandsons, Roger and Ken Turney, are our 2 elders to this day at the church. Another of their great-grandsons is the preacher of this church, and one of their great-great-grandsons, Todd Turney, serves as a deacon. So our family goes way back in the history of the Church of Christ here. Among the families that have had a strong influence on the church's history are the Donnells. The Donnell family was very influential in the church here. The Hawkinses, the Harrises, Marty's family, and the Whitties. And I'll tell you more about the Whitties in just a minute. As far as I know, the first elders, and this is what Uncle Lynn thought as well, were Lyndall Harris, Charlie Hawkins, and Lytle Whitty. Somebody told me, and I think it was my dad, that Joe Donnell knew the Whitties over at Gazaway and convinced Lytle Whitty to move to Auburntown with his big family, with several motives in mind. Number one, he had a big family, and churches need lots of people. He brought a lot of kids with him.
Pretty daughters.
And beautiful daughters. Every one of the Whitty girls was very attractive. And one of them married Gordon Summer, as a matter of fact. Nell was a Whitty. But he convinced Mr. Whitty to move over here because of his big family and because Mr. Whitty was a good singer. And my earliest memories of the singing at Auburntown, and Joyce would remember this as well, was of Lionel Whitty in that beautiful three-piece suit. He dressed fit to kill, and so did Miss Evelyn, in that beautiful three-piece suit with a pocket watch hanging in that pocket, leading the singing here, and that goes way back. Let's see. The land on which the church building stands now was donated by a woman named Catherine High, who apparently was a well-positioned lady here in the community. I've seen the High name before. I'll mention another person in a minute. The original building was just a singular rectangular structure with 3 rows of pews, an aisle in the middle, a communion table and pulpit down front, and then a couple of pews on either side, creating what historians call a cruciform shape, made the shape of a cross. And that was the original building. And according to, before I tell you this, one of the most interesting features of the building was the steeple at the top of it. It had a weather vane. I've still got part of that weather vane at home. And atop the weather vane was a cannonball. And nobody knows whatever became of the cannonball, but it was made by Captain B.A. High, and I assume he was related to Catherine High, but I don't know how, and the Historical Society maybe can discover that someday. But he was a local mechanic-blacksmith and was captain for the South during the Civil War. Came from Smith County over here, and that was one of the contributions that he made to the church. I don't know if he intended this or not, but I've often thought how appropriate, if he had, that he was fulfilling that dream of the prophets of a day when men would beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks, take weapons of war and turn them into weapons of peace. And that's just what he did when he made that steeple on top of the building. According to Daisy Dean Cooper, the original building burned in 1920. I've heard some people say that they tore it down, but Daisy Dean insisted no, it burned. And it was replaced in 22 by the present building, which of course 22 was, if your roots aren't here, a boom year for building in Auburntown. Wasn't that the year this was built? Mm-hmm. The old school was built then. Mm-hmm. Papa Hawkins' house, where Travis lives, was built that year. A lot of homes and other buildings were built around that time. Cost them about $6,000 to build. And the most expensive item in the building was the pews. They were about $2,000 just for the pews alone. It was built by a man named Charlie Cooper, who was Grady Cooper's daddy and Daisy Dean's father-in-law, along with his sons, and Marvin Hawkins, Papa Hawkins' brother, Tom Carter, and Grant and Tom McBroom, along with other people who lended a hand. There is a legend that when the framing of the building was completed, one of the Cooper boys, I don't know if it's Grady or who his brothers were, but one of them climbed to the very top rafter before they put the roofing on and stood on his hands atop the building. I don't know if that's true or not. I do know that the name Cooper is inscribed on one of those highest beams in the building, and you can get in there when you climb around it. It's not that difficult. If you don't mind bats and
Jimmy, take pictures for us.
Other varmints. Yeah, you might find Jimmy McKnight in there, speaking of varmints. Lynn Allen Harris remembers that some years later it was decided, and this was interesting, that a classroom addition was needed. That was added back to the back toward the fellowship building. Joe Donnell had recently purchased the now defunct Presbyterian church over here. And he possessed all of the materials, and he offered to donate the wood from the Presbyterian church for the classroom building. And they refused. I don't know if they refused because it was Presbyterian wood Or as Lynn thought, because the wood was so old, you couldn't have driven a nail in it if you wanted to.
Probably that.
So it was what we would call hard shell Presbyterian wood. That was my own joke, Jimmy. In our movement, we used to have some churches that we referred to fondly as one-cuppers. I don't know if the Baptist churches have any one-cuppers or not, but we used to have churches that insisted you only can use one cup when you take communion. Auburntown was never a one-cupper. We were a two-cupper church. There was a chalice, or rather a pitcher and two chalices and two sections, and the wine would be poured from the pitcher into the two chalices, and one person would pass one around one side and one around the other. And Lynn Allen insists that Dr. Van Hook was the cause of their ceasing that practice. That when he came to town, he insisted that that was not very healthful, and convinced them to modernize and go to the multiple cups. As far as I know, there are no one-cupper churches left, but there may be.
In Georgia.
In Georgia, there are. Well, there wasn't one in Long Beach when I was there, but I don't think they had but a member or two.
There was one in Ohio. And
Really?
we lived up there.
Okay.
I did go back.
What we're discovering just in this conversation alone is something that our movement has learned. And that is that the dream of total, complete Christian unity is not possible this side of heaven, because we're going to come up with something to disagree about. It's God's role to unite. It is man's genius to divide, and we'll find something to disagree about. And that was one of them. It was over how many cups you should use in the communion. Nowadays, of course, I don't know about the other churches around here, but we have the little packets thanks to the COVID crisis, and everybody has their own little packet. And I think Joyce likes that. Some of our folks don't.
I do.
When I traveled to the Holy Land, we took communion at Jerusalem with one cup that was passed around. It was the Church of Christ in Jerusalem, and I had Alibaba's revenge from our visit to Cairo, and I didn't want to share those germs with anybody, but I wanted to take communion, and so I just pitched it up way up like that and poured a little bit in my mouth so I didn't share my germs. Through the years, much of the church's growth was experienced through what we call gospel meetings. Baptists call them revivals. They're the same thing. A dynamic preacher from out of town would be invited to preach a series of sermons.
Or maybe not so dynamic.
Well, yeah, we have had a few
We've had some
that weren't that dynamic. In fact, Uncle Lynn remembered most about the gospel meetings. He would fall asleep on the pew. But anyway, a preacher from out of town would present a series of sermons, and often these were referred to as protracted meetings. And they were called that because they had a beginning, but the end was indefinite. It depended on how much interest there was. And as long as the interest held, the meeting would continue. And sometimes they could go as long as 2 or 3 weeks in these meetings. My earliest memory of any was with Charlie Taylor. Brother Charlie Taylor preached in Kentucky, and at this time he was in Murfreesboro, and he held a lot of meetings here at Auburntown, more than anyone else. And they would not only meet in the evening, they would also meet in the day. And so a preacher would have to have a lot of sermons stowed away for one of these protracted meetings. Well, I remember my mother and I riding with Brother Taylor, very old man at the time, to Auburntown. I didn't want to hear him preach. I wanted to see my grandparents. And I'll never forget this when we got to the foot of Old Milton Hill. You know, there was a sharp turn to the left and then around and then to the top. And we got to the very foot of the hill, that first sharp turn, and he stopped and sat on his horn. And I wondered, why in the world is he doing that? And I learned later that was the old way of letting anybody coming from the other direction know that you were about to enter that area. And so
Waking Billy Bogle up.
who's Billy Vogel?
He lived right there.
Oh, okay. There you go. Let's see.
Did he not, Jimmy?
There was a guy that always cut corners off.
Jimmy lived,
Swear
or
off.
Billy lived right there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Billy Gertrude lives.
Oh, yeah.
Bottom of the hill.
Lynn Allen remembered that most of the meetings, what he remembered most was falling asleep on those hard pews. During World War II, I do know that Papa Hawkins, during the maneuvers, Papa Hawkins, who was a very, very patriotic man, would go across and unlock the church building door so that the soldiers on the cold nights could go in and sleep in the building on those same hard pews. And since that time, we have padded the pews. And only Marty falls asleep. Lynn Allen told me a funny story I got to tell you. It was a preacher by the name of T.H. Kennedy, who was coming from Nashville to preach in a protracted meeting at Auburntown. And he'd never been here before. He'd been told about Auburntown, and they contracted him to come. And he got to the top of the hill and came down and turned into the first church building he came to. And got out of his car, and there were people there, and they were very cordial, and they began to visit and chat with each other. And he went on in the building and met their pastor, Kenny Leonard. And he told Brother Leonard that he was there to begin the meeting, and that's when Kenny realized the mistake that had been made. He said, "You stopped a little bit too soon. You need to go a bit further down the hill." Now, some of you don't know this, but I speak of Kenny Leonard very affectionately. This was his first pastorate, Auburntown was, after graduating from seminary in Louisville. And he met and fell in love with Charlie Hawkins' daughter, Hesta, my aunt. And so he was always Uncle Kenny to me. And we loved him dearly. And his daughter, Lois, is still one of my best friends and first cousins. Anyway, let's see, I read that to you, told you about it. Another story Lynn Allen told me was about a Sunday baptism that he witnessed. This actually, and y'all can talk to the Nichols next week about this. This, he said, happened at Shiloh Baptist, but he thought it was worth sharing, and I thought it was hilarious. Shiloh Baptist was having a baptism down in the creek, and we used the creek as well. As a matter of fact, I can tell you this, and I forgot to include this. The first baptistry for the Church of Christ was somewhere down here along near the creek at a spring. And one of the members walled up the spring so that they could use it for baptism. And the water was so cold, they used it one time. Never used it again. So they would go to the creek instead. It was easier to break the ice on the surface of the creek. But anyway, Lynn Allen somehow went to this baptismal service for Shiloh Baptist. And when he came home to tell his mom about it, what he remembered the most was what the preacher said when he baptized the people. I think she probably asked him, what did the preacher say? And he said, "I now baptize you in the name of your Father, the hot sun, and the Holy Ghost." And that's it. I would be glad to answer questions if you have any questions. I'll be glad to
True
answer.
story.
Unless your name is Jimmy Mingle.
I've got an interesting picture I meant to bring tonight but forgot it. But my grandparents lived in the Ventry's house.
Yes.
When my dad was born in the Ventry's house.
Adrian Van Treese's house. Yeah.
And I have a picture, and it my dad's on the front sidewalk, and it's a picture of my granddad's two mares in the field. But Brandtree's Avenue is not there.
Mm-hmm.
Austin Susie's, the field is in between the Brandtree's house and the church.
Yeah.
And it's a great picture of the church
I'd like
in
to see
the
it.
background.
Is it this building or the
No, yes,
preceding?
this building. That would have been in, it's 1941 or
Okay.
1942.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is this building.
Yeah. I'd love to see it.
Was the classes built on the back of it
Yes.
by then? They were?
By the 40s, no.
No.
They're not. That happened in the 50s, after the war,
Okay.
according to Lynn Allen. Yeah.
There's
So this picture would probably, I don't know, I've got to go home now and look at, and also look at the steeple about that ball
Yeah.
that's on top and see if that's visible
Yeah.
in that picture. Because it is a very good picture of the church.
If y'all ever wanted to see the structure of the building is fascinating. It really is.
Yeah.
It's one of the few churches around back then, especially that had a fan-shaped auditorium and a floor that went down to the front, and then when you get to the front, you go up. And they tell me that was a necessity because under that lectern area is solid rock, just rock. And rather than try to do something with that, they just put it in that way. And it has created fits for us in cold weather, because when we get snow and ice, because we don't get any sunshine at that end of the building, it takes forever for that ice to melt.
It had a big potbelly stove over on the left if you're going in the building. And then they later replaced it, and it was a big electrical unit. And Mom and Daddy decided to go from this side of the church to that pew. And every time Daddy would cross his legs, he'd hit that electric thing and boom! And everybody would look up, you know. And we've sat there ever since. Of course, that's long gone, that big thing. But
It's funny how those of us who grew up, I didn't grow up in the church here. I grew up in Murfreesboro, but came here often when I was a kid. It's funny how some things stick in our mind. Speaking of instruments of music, one of the things I remember vividly was Papa Hawkins beating time with his cane. I guess that was okay. That was a percussion instrument.
Which church did you grow up in Murfreesboro?
Minerva Drive.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's my folks.
That's in your family.
well, Granny said that at one point they didn't have any men that could pitch,
Right.
you know, a song, and so she would start it from the pew.
Mm-hmm. And that's why they got Loud and Witty to move over here.
Probably so.
Yeah. So Granny wouldn't have to.
Not
do
that
it.
he led the longest prayers.
Yeah.
He'd go over there and he'd go, "Oh Lord," and we go, "Oh Lord." I mean, 20 minutes later, sometimes he'd still. I mean, those were some long prayers.
He was a good man, though.
He was a very good man.
Really good man.
Talking about stretching out on the pew, that was really something we wanted to do.
Well, if y'all don't have any questions, I appreciate it.